No sign of an experienced crew is to be found on an apparently unharmed vessel, leaving family members, authorities, and internet sleuths alike to speculate as to their whereabouts. Join us today as we discuss the bizarre case of the KAZ II.
3, 2, 1.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode. This episode is going to be done by the one and only Akmal. Yay! Crowd goes wild. Okay, take it away.
Whatever. On April the 17th, 2007, two trouts fishing vessels spotted a sailing boat drifting across reefs and along channels between them in the Darley Reef, about 55 nautical miles from Bowen, Australia. The fishermen reported seeing no one on the yacht, and from their view, the head sails were torn. They did not try to none of them tried to board the ship or make radio contact with it, as they did. Oh my God, what am I saying? None of them tried to board the ship or make radio contact with it, as they were convinced that the boat was being manned and navigating intelligently through the reefs. The fishermen had stumbled upon the now infamous vessel that would be shrouded in mystery and whose occupants remained missing. Derek Batten was a 56-year-old Australian man had planned to navigate the waters around Australia with his wife on a sailing boat, but his wife had previously gotten sick on a cruise they had taken that Christmas, and he did not want to risk her safety again. Instead, Derek asked his neighbor Peter Dunstead, who was 69 years old, at the time, to accompany him on his voyage, and Peter agreed. The pair decided to bring along Peter's brother James Dunstead as well, as James had a lot of sailing experience under his belt. The group of sailors were now very experienced, but had taken many maritime navigation and safety courses in preparation for their voyage. Derek had meticulously planned the route they would take on their journey. The first leg of their journey would take them from Arley Beach to Townsville, about 250 kilometers north along the western coast of Australia, and then from Townsville to Perth, all the way on the other side of the continent. The group had purchased a 9.8-meter catamaran vessel named the KAZ II. Derek and his wife had previously taken 2 trips on the vessel, but this one was a bit different. The journey from Early Beach to Townsville was much longer in length than what any of the men had navigated before. For this reason, the crew had had their route checked by more experienced sailors. Derek's wife reported that her husband was very skilled in maritime navigation, and although the vessel was easy to handle, Derek had taken many safety precautions in preparation for his voyage. She described him as level-headed and no one to panic instructions. The crew of the KAZ II had set out on their voyage from Early Beach on April the 14th, 2007. At about 10 a.m., the crew left Chute Harbor. A witness claimed they saw the fenders on the boat still hanging on the gunwales. Their journey didn't progress long before the men started experiencing technical issues with their navigation equipment, and Derek phoned the previous owner of the boat, Mr. Douglas, who had known about the journey and was keen to provide assistance. They decided to meet at Early Beach and solve the issue. Sensing that the men were being impatient due to the technical issues, Mr. Douglas decided to persuade them to make a shorter leg the next day to the eco resort on the other side of Cape Colchester. Mr. Douglas assured the men knew where they had to go, and the route he had helped them plot was close to shore. He also advised the men to make contact with the volunteer marine rescue organization and let them know of their presence in the area. The next day, on the 15th, Between 7 and 8 a.m., the men began their second leg of the journey, steaming out of Able Point and Early Beach and seeming optimistic and in good spirits. Mr. Douglas noted that the engine was a bit loud and that morning, but was not concerned as this was usual for the vessel. Peter Tunsted's wife had phoned him at around 9:30 a.m. and says she heard his brother and Derek in the background. This was the last time any of the family would have contact with the three men. A video camera discovered on the boat showed a recording that was timestamped at 10:05 a.m. on the 15th. The cameraman was determined to be James Tunstead, and it showed Derek drinking coffee from a blue mug and Peter fishing on the aft stairway. A white rope was seen trailing behind the boat, and the sea seemed choppy with an estimated 15-knot wind speed. The video showed a 360-degree view of the surrounding area, and authorities were able to pinpoint the exact location of the boat at 10:05 that day. The boat had traveled 20 kilometers from where it had started in Early Beach and was between Armit and Grassy Island. On that day, following the advice of Mr. Douglas, the men had radioed the VMR. The radio operator at the time told that he had received a transmission from a boat named KAZ II, and those three men were aboard, and that they were near George's Point, about 5 kilometers from their position at 10:05 a.m. The transmission was reportedly radioed to the operator at 6:45 in the evening, though this testimony is unreliable as the witness had not logged this transmission at that time. It is possible that he had received it in the morning and logged it later in the day. Isabel Wheeler had gone fishing to the Champlain Bay, where she would have had a good view of the boats coming from the south heading to Gloucester Passage, which was on the way to Cape Gloucester, the intended destination of the KAZ II that day. After a while, she spotted a white boat sailing due west towards Gloucester Passage. On the way were two islands, which were visible from where Isabel stood. She said when the white boat was in between the island, the boat took 90 degrees turned and started sailing west towards the ocean. Isabel was unable to identify the boat, being the KAZ II or not. Mr. Douglas had planned an outing with a friend on the Eco Resort and Cape Gloucester. On his way, he decided to stop at Dingle Beach, which was on the way to Gloucester Passage, to observe the KAZ II. It was midday at the time, and Douglas figured this was sufficient time for them to have been passing the waters next to the beach. But to Douglas's surprise, the boat was nowhere to be seen. If Isabel had indeed seen the KAZ II, this would explain why Douglas had not seen the boat at that time. Douglas continued to the resort, thinking the boat had sailed further than expected, but did not see the boat there either. After lunch, Douglas went to a resort that was closer to Gloucester Passage and did not see the boat there either. A resident of Dingle Beach, Matthew Howey, corroborated Douglas's account of not seeing the boat on the 15th, but said he saw it the next day on the 16th. The boat was in around the same position Isabel Wheeler had seen it the day before. Howie watched it only for a few minutes. A few weeks later, he recounted to his neighbor about the boat, who had also seen the same boat Howie had seen on the 16th early in the afternoon. The neighbor, Ian Stonehouse, said he saw the boat sailing out to sea in a similar way to which Isabel Wheeler had described she saw the previous day. Both men described features of the boat that confirmed to authorities that it was indeed KAZ II they saw that day. The next confirmed sighting on the yacht was on the 15th with the Coral Trout fishing boat. On the 18th, the boat is seen heading east 80 miles from the shore from Townsville by a surveillance aircraft from the Australian Customs Service. The sighting was reported to the Australian Search and Rescue and the Townsville Water Police. The following day, after having observed the boat to be, quote, lifeless, enough concern was raised that the authorities boarded the KAZ II to check on the vessel. There was no one on the vessel when they boarded it. The main sail was damaged and the fenders were still hung on the gunwales. Fenders are used when two boats meet and need to exchange passengers. The cabin was clean and well kept. James's t-shirt and sunglasses are found on a seat behind the back seat, but cannot be seen in the video that he had recorded. There was no sign of foul play and nothing seemed out of place. There was a gun in a gun case on board, but was later confirmed to be the lawful property of Derek's. The ammunition was accounted for and there were no rounds missing. The life rings were unused and the mainsail was torn and the white rope that could be seen trailing the boat was now left bundled on the foredeck. The lure of the fishing pole was seen being used by Derek was stuck in the rudder. The boat was towed into Town's Wood for further investigation. The beds were unkept, suggesting the men had slept on them for not long ago. Fingerprints were taken from the upper deck and cabin of the vessel, and only those of the men were found. For this reason, the lower deck was not checked for fingerprints. A detail of the family was of the now missing men were keen to rectify, but the authorities were not convinced as there was sufficient evidence to exempt foul play, and so a lower deck sweep for fingerprints wasn't warranted. Due to the tidiness of the interior, a storm sweeping the men into the ocean was considered unlikely. An immediate missing persons investigation was launched on the 28th of April, and helicopters were dispatched over the surrounding waters to locate the men. The helicopters searched around Darley Reef and also followed the direction in which Isabel Wheeler, Ian Stonehouse, and Matthew Howie had seen the boat take off a few days prior. Infrared helicopters were sent out to search the surrounding reefs. Data from the GPS on board the KAZ II was extracted, but due to the limited memory on the device, only the latest 48 hours of the data is stored and the rest is deleted. This left authorities with GPS data going back only to the 18th. This explains why the initial recorded GPS location on the KAZ II is 30 miles north from Gloucester Island. Using this information, the various eyewitness testimonies, and the information regarding the location of the vessel gathered from the video that James Dunstead had recorded, a 1,000 square nautical mile search area was produced. Many aircraft and helicopters were dispatched in pursuit of the men, and commercial vessels were sent to search the surrounding reefs.
The following day, surface search teams were sent out in hopes the men had reached the land and searched the island and shores across the area, but to no avail. Dr. Paul Luckin, a survival time expert who police had consulted, posited that with the evidence he was given, it was likely that the man had fallen overboard with no flotation devices on either the 15th or 16th of April, and that there was no prospect of finding them alive had they remained in the water. Their investigation was concluded on June the 25th, with a coroner ruled the trio dead, citing the most likely cause of death being accidental drowning after being overboard. The most plausible explanation given to the case is that Derek fell overboard fishing as his lure was found stuck in the rudder, and that one of the other men had jumped in to save him. The third man likely drew the sails in an effort to turn the ship back to grab the other two men, but the sudden dropping of the sails must have caused the sail to tear, and as the sails swung back, it could have thrown the third man overboard as well. This theory has many holes in it. For one, the life ring was not used, something peculiar since it was easy to grasp at the upper deck. Secondly, the ship could be turned without the use of sails, as the KAZ II had engines as well. Thirdly, even if the man had chosen to use the sails and had swum, the man could have deployed them from the cabin and would have been safely away from the sail as to not be thrown overboard.
That was quite a lot. Like, this is like a heavy one.
Basically, what happened is that experienced sailmen, they go on this boat. It's not a difficult to navigate boat,
Sailing close to the shore. But then all of a sudden they start doing these weird things, going off course, going into the ocean, coming back and going into the ocean, all this nonsense. And then finally people are concerned enough that they go onto the boat and they're not there.
Wow.
So yeah, and the most likely explanation is that they fell overboard, but we have like no proper time frame of when they fell over. A key detail was that the fenders were deployed, so that means like, fenders are basically like a bridge between two boats, and if they were deployed, it means another boat had likely like intercepted the KAZ II.
So, was like the cause of death drowning or like?
They never found the body, so they don't know, but they're suspecting it was drowning. But then the theory they gave has so many holes in it as well. So
Imagine a lifeless body just floating in the middle of the ocean.
I've heard so many theories as well, like you know the paranormal, the aliens, they just vanished. They went to another dimension. All the cuckoo stuff. Nothing plausible. The most plausible one was the one that the police gave, which was the drowning thing. But then even that has so many holes in it.
Oh my god. I don't know if I told this theory, but like if you drown in the ocean and like fishes basically feed on you, imagine, okay? And fishes excrete this or like they don't, and then fishermen capture these fishes, and it's like you consume maybe the dead remains of another human being, and because you're consuming the fish. So that is just like some twisted ass this thing that my mind just came up with after I read this one case. And then, yeah, I don't know. I told my parents about it.
Don't eat
Couldn't
fish
stand the sight of.
because there's a 0.0000001% chance you might be committing cannibalism.
Imagine consuming an animal that consumed the dead remains of a human being without even knowing. It sucks that they never found the body because then, like, no one really gets closure, like the family members.
So that was such an unfortunate case, man. Like the families don't have any closure, and like even the police. I kind of felt like a hint of incompetency from the police. Well, yeah.
Really? Well, there you have it. The KAZ II. Paranormal shit. But cut that part out, okay? I don't want to curse. Yeah, that was that episode. And stay tuned for next week's episode. It's done by me. It's amazing. So, yeah, hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Bye.